Okay, welcome to our Erev Shabbat Parashat class. This is Erev Shabbat Nachamu, the Shabbat of comfort, and Parashat Vayetchanan. And what does the Parashat, the Torah, have to tell us about going to the store, about parking, and about hanging around your office for that matter? Believe it or not, it's somewhere embedded in our Parashat. Moshe Rabbeinu, in the course of offering further guidance to Am Yisrael, and this is after we see the Aser HaDeberot in this parasha taught again by Moshe. This is also after we see Kiryat Shema in this parasha, and right before the end of the parasha, there is a very, very interesting pasuk that is not less known in terms of the directive and the guidance being given by the Torah. We are in Parashat Vayetchanan, Perek Vav, chapter 6. And you can look at Pasuk Yud Zayin, verse 17. It says there, Shamor tishmerun et mizvot Adonai Elohechem, ve'edotav, ve'chukav, asher tzavach. Keep, observe the mitzvot of Hashem and the various ordinances and commemorative, all the different types of law, asher tzavach, that he commanded you, a general pasuk. We've seen similar pasukim to that all over Torah Shebechtav. But then, pasuk Yud Chet is our pasuk of focus. The command is as follows: V'asita hayashar v'hatov b'einei Adonai למען יתבלח ובאת וירשת את הארץ הטובה שנשבע אדוני לאבותיך. It's very hard to translate these words, but I'll try. And do what is forthright and good in the eyes of Hashem, in order for him to benefit you and bring you and inherit for you the good land, it's Israel, which he promised to your forefathers. Let's focus on the earlier segment of that pasuk. V'asita hayashar v'hatov b'einei Adonai. What exactly is the directive? What is the command over here? What's the expectation of doing what is good and forthright? I don't think it's possible to sound more general than that in terms of if this is a mitzvah, or at least a type of guidance in the Torah. Do what's yashar v'tov, good and I mean, just about anything can fit into that. Is that something beyond or besides the mitzvot that we've been commanded? Is this a mitzvah on its own? Is this coming to support some other command? It's very general, seems benign. It doesn't seem to specifically include anything, and yet, there is an entire world behind the phrase of this pasuk. The Ramban Nachmani, as we call him, the great commentator on the Torah that we rely on so often, says as follows. First thing he says is that l'rabotenu. In other words, he seems to be referencing some type of midrash, statement of Hazal Gemara. He says l'rabotenu b'zeh midrash yafeh, a nice midrash. It happens to be what he's about to say. We found difficulty finding this in the Midrash. When I say me, I mean Chachamim. And it happens to be that Rashi echoes the same sentence, half the sentence, commenting on this phrase in the Pasuk, Asita Yashar V'Hatov B'Einei Hashem. Amru Zo Peshara V'Lifnim Mishurat Hadin. That's the whole comment. When it says you should do what's Yashar V'Tov, good and forthright in the eyes of God, it's referring to Peshara, compromise, and Lifnim Mishurat Hadin. Ironically, we actually say in English above and beyond the law, but the word Lifnim means opposite, it means within the law. But it is referring to that which we describe in English as above and beyond the law. In other words, do what seems to be more of what's commanded and expected of you, and peshara, compromise. Now, what is that referring to? We just tried to clarify a general pasuk with seems to be just as much of a general or almost as much of a general midrash, which we really can't find a source for. Again, Rashi brings this. And he goes on to say as follows. He goes on to explain on his own and elaborate upon this notion. And that is, look, the previous pasuk said to follow the commands of Hashem, that which I command you, black on white in the Torah Shebichtav, Torah Sheba'al Peh, the explicit, the specified laws and commandments of the Torah from Hashem. And then, as Ramban explains this statement of Hachamim, the intent of the Torah when it says "Va'asita hayashar ve'atov be'anei Adonai" is also to sometimes have to follow or be directed by that which lo sivach, that I didn't command you. In other words, where there's no specific command guiding a particular situation in life, says the Ramban, still find a way to do what is tov v'yashar. What does that mean? He goes on to explain that it is completely impossible for the Torah. Nothing's impossible for Hashem, but it would have been very unrealistic for the Torah Kedoshah to articulate and state for every situation all of the some guiding laws for all of the behaviors and all of the interactions of man with his peers, with his neighbors, in business, through all types of transactions, in public, in government, etc., etc. In other words, the Torah in Parashat Kedoshim gives us a number of directives, Ben Adam lahavero, lo tisna tahicha, tal racha kamocha, lo tikom, lo titor, lo ta'amol adam ra'echa, etc. And they cover many, many, many life situations. However, there are so many specific interactions that we have dozens, if not hundreds of times on a daily basis, and tens and hundreds of thousands of times in the course of our life, in so many different settings, be they social, be they business, be they going about your business like in a car or in a store, etc., that there's just no way the Torah could have tailor-made a directive to guide us in each and every situation. Instead, says the Ramban, based on that statement of du peshara lifnim mishurat hadin, says the Torah, asita hayashar v'hatov v'anei Adonai, meaning you have to use the Torah guidance, use what you know, use what was explicitly taught by Hashem in the Torah as your frame of reference, as your guide, your guiding light, to conduct yourself properly in every situation, in every interaction in life. Similarly, I refer now to the laws of shechenim, of neighbors in the Rambam. And at the end of those laws, there is a set of laws called bar mesra, which happens to do with the idea of when you sell your property, then the first right of refusal or of buying goes to the property owner that's contiguous to your property, the next door land or the next door house, according to halacha. And the Magid Mishneh, Rav Magid, who comments on the Rambam, at the very end of the laws of shechenim, of neighbors, and of that particular set of laws, comments as follows. He says, the Torah has told us how to conduct ourselves with proper behavior in life and proper ways of interaction in this world. Many of them is brought in Parashat Kedoshim, starting with Kedoshim, Tihiyu, be act holy. And also he says, Va'asita hayashar v'hatov. And the intent of the Torah is to deal in a proper manner with other people. And he says, and I'll quote this, Lo haya min hara'ui b'chol ze l'savot piratim. It wouldn't have been appropriate to elaborate and for the Torah to explicitly articulate all the details. He says, because the truth is, the Torah's mitzvot apply in every time, in every place, in every context. And he goes on to say that midot ha'adam ha'nagato, people's behaviors, cultures, change a little bit in every time and place. You have to know how to adapt the laws of the Torah to fit a certain setting and to conduct yourself properly based on God's will in every setting according to Torah's guidance. And that is the general directive. Now, this is actually a directive then. It's an expectation for us. Va'asita hayashad v'hatov. In our parasha. Actually, in next week's Parashat Ekev, it changes the order, which I won't discuss why now. It says Hatov HaYashar. This is definitely a directive in the Torah that Ramban is conveying to us. And the truth is, many laws in Choshen Mishpat, neighbors and partners, have to do with this directive, as explained just now by the Magid Mishneh. So that's very interesting. But I want to point out something to you. Really, it's a question. Where and how do you see from these two very general words, Yashad ve'tov? Tov just means good in Hebrew, as far as we know. Yashad, what does Yashad mean? Straight, forthright. The Torah could have used other words to describe this type of behavior and directive. And how does just saying Yashad ve'tov mean what we said it means just now? The truth is, if you project in two parashiyot from now into Parashat Re'eh, the word Yashad seems to be used in a very different way. The Torah there, and talking about the future when we are have a Bet HaMishkan and a Bet HaMikdash in the land, we have to bring korbanot in a more organized way than we do here in the desert. It says there, don't do don't do everything we're doing today in the desert. Now, there are different commentaries as to what that means. According to most, it means that there's going to be a much more organized and disciplined system of bringing korbanot in terms of time and place and what you bring when you get to the Bet HaMikdash in the land. But in general, that term, don't do what we're doing today. It sounds like when you hear that in Hebrew, everyone's doing what they want. It sounds more of a chaotic description, a very unorganized terminology. Everyone's doing what's right in their eyes. And really, the more, I would say, poignant and clear implication of that term is at the very end of Parashat Shofetim, the last pasuk there, when it says, "Bayamim ahem en melech b'Yisrael," in those days there was not yet a king in Israel. Ish hayashad ba'anav yaseh. Everyone's doing whatever they want, right? It sounds mayhem, right? It sounds like chaos, or at least disorganization. Hayashad ba'anav. There, the word yashad, if not having negative connotations, certainly has a different tone to it, a different feel to it. Now, it is true that the word Yashad, as we read in Ha'azinu yesterday, describes Hashem, Sadiq v'Yasharhu. We spoke of in our class that the book of Bereshit is called Sefer HaYashar because the Avot are called Yesharim. So it is a high compliment, and it is used in modern terminology as such. But the basic implication, which is a bit of a contradiction, right? The basic implication of Yashad on its own is unorganized, undisciplined, right? So then how is it that just by throwing in the word Tov, all of a sudden, Yashad and Tov, you have this recipe we've just given you? how to conduct yourselves in all of life situations, if the word yashar doesn't seem to imply that. Allow me to explain. There's a pasuk in the book of Kohelet where Shlomo HaMelech says that V'Hashem asa et ha'adam yashar, that God created man yashar. What does that mean? The basic idea in that pasuk is that man was created with an innate goodness in him, a propensity to do good, or else man would never be held accountable for doing evil, unless God expected better things of man. And therefore, even though we do have tendencies in an evil inclination, man has an innate goodness, and that's where his default really is. Mankind, we're talking about. God instilled in the neshama, all mankind. And therefore, man has a natural ability and expectation to be compassionate, to be rational, to be kind. That his original state, his original form, his authentic nature and being, says Kohelet. Now, that's very nice. It's a wonderful description of man. The problem is that when man tries to apply this nature of his, the skill of his, of yashrut, he does so subjectively, right? How do you know? How do you apply your innate goodness? Well, it's relative. Every time and place, what's called good in the 21st century in North America is not what was called good in the 18th century in Europe or any other continent, right? And every time and place. And that's why, of course, we have a descending standard of morality, unfortunately, in this world of ours, because there's no frame of reference for good, right? Good is relative. It's subjective based on the eyes of man. What we call good today, 50 years ago, is absolutely unthinkable, right? So that's the problem with saying, I shouldn't say good, yashar, but using our innate goodness, so to speak, to guide ourselves. So insert the word tov. Where do we first see the word tov? It means good, but it's much more powerful and deep than that, because the first time we see the word tov in the Torah, of course, is in creation. Vayar Elohim ki tov. God creates, and he says as he creates that it's good, tov. And what does that mean? That doesn't just mean good. English does not do that word justice. Tov means perfect. Tov means godly, as only Hashem can perform. It's the perfectness of creation. It's the perfection of creation. And therefore, it's also the perfection of everything. It's an absolute goodness. It never changes. It's unbendable. So therefore, a person has this wonderful natural nature of yashrut, being forthright, an innate goodness, but it's undisciplined. And we require, therefore, the tov of God, the absolute truth that only Hashem has, and by extension, his Torah offers, to help rein in and direct and discipline that yashar, that basic good nature of man, which is a subjective goodness, is all over the place. How do you apply being a good guy, being yashar? You do it by inserting the Torah, which is represented by tov, by an absolute, unbending truth that is not subjective at all. It's objective. It's God's objective, absolute truth. So when you combine yashar and tov, it's the perfect formula. It's the perfect recipe of man's behavior, where we are motivated by a natural tendency to be good and kind and compassionate. And we then moderate that, we complement that, we discipline that, we rein that goodness in with the Torah HaKadoshah and Tov, and the absolute truth of God, Yashar and Tov, the perfect combination. I'll give you a very controversial in modern politics, but great modern example, and that is the LGBTQ movement, right? Now, right now, if a person speaks out about it, which I don't know if I'm about to do that, but I don't, we're in a Torah class right now, so we can speak Torah ideas. But if a person in the outer world, even those who don't believe in it and don't subscribe to it, and not part of that political, arena, are afraid in our days to speak out because it becomes so normal. It became like speaking out about, charity or milk. You can't speak out against it. It became to that extent. Now, the truth is, besides it being so politically incorrect, the other reason why it's hard to have an argument in our world against that lifestyle is because if you look and you think about the underpinning of it, it's really based on love, right? Someone wants to express love to somebody else. That's the idea. How could you argue with love? And therefore, in our descending standard of morality, man ended up spending and expressing his yashar, his yashrut, his innate goodness, his want to do good and to love others in a very perverse way. And only because we have the Tov, the absolute truth of the Torah, that says, I'm sorry, but I have an absolute idea of how relationships in this world should work. I'm saying that's not okay. LGBTQ, it's not okay. And therefore we have Yashar, but Yashar gets out of hand, our innate nature to do good, a propensity to be loving people, and it has to be reined in by the Tov, the absolute truth of Torah, and say, that's how I want you to limit your tendency to want to love in that specific example. And that is the perfect formula, therefore, and there are many other examples we can give. But coming back to our parashat, our phrase, it's really the formula for man's behavior. In every situation in life, whether it's driving, parking, right? It's correct right now to double park and then put my hazards on and block traffic? Is that okay? Is it okay? Is it okay to cut a line in a store because I'm in a rush? Is it okay because I'm angry in business at some customer to start cursing in the office and in the showroom? Right? Is that okay? Because sometimes trying to do something good, we get carried away. We have our yashar part that then becomes undisciplined. And we need the tov. We need the absolute truth of the Torah to keep us honest, to keep us disciplined, to rein in our uncontrolled yashar, so to speak. And we put together that ultimate beautiful combination of yashar and tov. The Torah gives us the recipe of behavior in every situation in life. And very unspecifically, but very clearly, in our parasha, next week's parasha as well, Torah Kedoshah says, yes, I do have laws regarding driving and conducting ourselves in all of our interactions in life. And although they're not all explicit, I gave you laws in the Torah, general ordinances, Parashat Kedoshim and elsewhere, as to how to behave. I want you to take them and apply them to every setting in life. How? Act yashar v'tov. Take your natural goodness, your innate, wonderful nature as a human being, and complement it with the tov, with the absolute truth of the Torah. That combination will guide you in every single situation in life as long as you live on planet Earth. Shabbat Shalom.